On the banks of the Tiber River, a small village thrived, slowly becoming the heart of the most powerful empire the world has ever known. From its humble beginnings to the crowning of its first emperor, the rise of Rome is a tale of ambition, betrayal, and transformation. We often hear of the greatness the Roman Empire achieved, but how did it start? The legend of Rome begins with a pair of brothers and a Colosseum-sized dream. Welcome back to the Historian's Table, where today we begin a new series, the Chronicles of Rome, which will detail over 1,000 years of Roman history. In this first episode, we'll be covering the beginnings of Rome, up to when it finally became an empire. What better way to kick off Rome's saga than with a cold-blooded murder, perfectly setting the stage for the many bloodbaths to come. The story of Rome begins in 753 BC, with the tale equal parts myth and mystery. Romulus and Remus, twin brothers born of the god Mars and a mortal woman, Rhea Silvia, were abandoned at birth. On the banks of the Tiber they were left to die, but were saved by a she-wolf who nursed them in a cave, later called the Lupercal. A shepherd, Faustulus, found and raised them, and as young men, they dreamed of building a grand city. As they set out to realize this dream, their ambition quickly turned to rivalry. Romulus chose the Palatine Hill to lay their foundation. Remus chose the Aventine. To settle the dispute, they sought a sign from the gods. Remus then spotted 6 vultures, but Romulus claimed 12, insisting divine favor. As Romulus began building his walls, Remus mocked him, leaping over them in defiance. In a fit of rage, Romulus struck his brother, killing him, declaring,
"So shall it be for any who cross my walls."
Thus, Rome was born, its first king crowned in fratricide. But how much of this is true? Archaeological evidence confirms settlements on the Palatine Hill as early as the 10th century BC, suggesting a hint of truth within the legend. Rome was most likely an independent village, settled by nomads, with the tale of Romulus and Remus likely being fabricated later. The legend perfectly reflects Rome's core values: ambition, conflict, and divine destiny. It's a story the Romans themselves cherished, a foundation myth that set the stage for their relentless ascent to power. For nearly 250 years, Rome was ruled by 7 kings, a period that blends legend and history. Early kings like Numa Pompilius established religious rites and civic structures, including the worship of Janus, a god associated with beginnings, endings, transitions, and time, and establishing a primitive calendar. But the later kings, particularly the Etruscan Tarquin the Proud, grew tyrannical, the firsts of many tyrants Rome would come to face. In 509 BC, a scandal gripped Rome. Tarquin's son assaulted Lucretia, a noblewoman whose honor was her life. Her suicide sparked a revolt led by Lucius Junius Brutus, who expelled the monarchy and founded the Roman Republic. This new government system, with elected consuls and a senate, promised to deter tyranny. Yet, as Rome's power grew, so did its challenges, both from within and beyond its walls. The Republic was experimental, with 2 consuls elected annually and a senate to balance power. But harmony doesn't exist in politics. The plebeians, common people, clashed with the patrician elite over rights. In 494 BC, the plebeians seceded to the Sacred Mount, winning the right to elect tribunes with veto power. Over time, laws like the 12 Tables in 450 BC codified Roman justice, and plebeians gained access to higher offices. Meanwhile, Rome's growing armies conquered neighboring tribes, Latins, Volsci, Aequi, securing central Italy by the late 4th century BC. Rome finally met their match with Carthage, a North African powerhouse. The Punic Wars would undoubtedly forge Rome's destiny. The First Punic War, from 264 to 241 BC, was a naval-focused war over Sicily. Rome, with no existing fleet whatsoever, built one from scratch, using a captured Carthaginian ship as a blueprint. They introduced the Corvus, a boarding device that turned the tides, so to speak, allowing for Rome to attack enemies face to face. With this technology, Rome secured Sicily as its first province. The Second Punic War, from 218 to 201 BC, was even tougher for Rome. Carthage's general Hannibal boldly crossed the Alps with war elephants to invade Italy. His victories at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae in 216 BC were devastating. Cannae alone saw over 50,000 Romans slaughtered in a single day, an act of brutality. But Rome wasn't built in a day. Adopting a slower strategy of attrition, Rome wore down Hannibal and his troops. Scipio Africanus, a young general who studied Hannibal's tactics, invaded Africa, forcing Hannibal to return. At Zama in 202 BC, Scipio crushed him, making Rome the Mediterranean's dominant power. The Third Punic War, from 149 to 146 BC, was Rome's final act of vengeance. After a brutal siege, Carthage was burned to the ground, its people enslaved, and its land pillaged. Rome's many victories brought wealth, but fueled inequality. The plebeians' gains didn't erase the divide between rich and poor. In 133 BC, Tiberius Gracchus, a tribune, proposed land reforms to help the struggling farmers. The Senate, guarding their estates, had him clubbed to death by a mob. His brother Gaius, elected tribune in 123 BC, pushed even further, offering grain subsidies and new colonies. He too was killed, along with 3,000 supporters in 121 BC. These murders exposed the fragility of the Roman Republic. Violence was becoming a political tool. The rise of powerful generals further widened the cracks. Gaius Marius, a new man from outside the elite, reformed the army by enlisting landless citizens, creating a professional force loyal to commanders, not the state. His rival, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, took it further, marching on Rome in 88 BC, a shocking betrayal of Republican ideals. As dictator, Sulla's prescriptions, or death lists, targeted enemies, spreading terror. These civil wars showed a republic teetering on the edge. The infamous Julius Caesar would be the man with the ambition to reshape Rome. From 58 to 50 BC, he conquered Gaul, which is modern France and Belgium, crossing the Rhine and even landing in Britain, a Roman first. His commentaries on the Gallic War weren't simply military reports, they were propaganda, cunningly cementing his legend. In Egypt, Caesar allied with the beautiful Cleopatra, supporting her fight against her brother Ptolemy XIII in a civil war. Their victory, and their subsequent son Caesarion, tied Rome to Egypt's wealth, but alarmed the Senate, who feared Caesar's ever-growing power. In 49 BC, the Senate ordered Caesar to disband his army. Instead, he defiantly crossed the Rubicon River with his legions, declaring,
Alia iacta est.
"The die is cast." This act sparked civil war. Caesar was swiftly victorious and became a dictator, reforming the calendar and expanding citizenship. But his near-kingly power and rumored monarchic ambitions sparked fear. By 44 BC, a conspiracy formed, led by Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus, both former allies. On the Ides of March, Caesar entered the Senate House, ignoring warnings from his wife Calpurnia and a soothsayer. Tullius Cimber grabbed his toga, signaling the attack. Servilius Casca struck first, stabbing Caesar in the neck. Others joined, delivering 23 wounds. Caesar fought back, possibly wounding an attacker, but ultimately perished. Some sources, like Suetonius, say Caesar saw Brutus and whispered in Greek,
Kaisi Teknon.
Others claim he died silently, pulling his toga over his head. The Senate collapsed into chaos, and Rome spiraled into turmoil. Caesar's death didn't save the Republic. It completely shattered it. His heir, 18-year-old Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, thankfully simply known as Octavian, stepped into the void of disrepair. Joining Mark Antony and Lepidus, he formed the Second Triumvirate, crushing Caesar's assassins at Philippi in 42 BC, avenging his father. But the alliance frayed. Octavian and Antony divided the empire, with Antony ruling the east alongside Cleopatra. Their partnership effectively collapsed, leading to the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. Octavian's fleet, led by Agrippa, outmaneuvered Antony and Cleopatra's forces. Cleopatra fled, Antony followed, and to avoid capture and public humiliation, they took their own lives in Egypt. Octavian was now alone. In 27 BC, the Senate bestowed on him the title Augustus, meaning revered one, finally marking the birth of the great Roman Empire. Augustus established himself as an emperor, the first emperor of Rome. He reorganized the army, established a professional civil service, and built roads, aqueducts, and temples. Poets like Virgil and Horace glorified his reign, ushering in the Pax Romana, a 200-year era of relative peace and prosperity. Augustus boasted,
I found a Rome of bricks. I leave to you one of marble.
a metaphor for the empire's newfound stability and strength. From a village born in blood to an empire spanning 3 continents, Rome's rise was a saga of conquest, betrayal, and reinvention. Augustus's reign brought stability, but the empire's vastness hid cracks. Barbarian invasions, internal corruption, and the weight of ambition loomed. Could Rome sustain its newfound glory, or would it crumble under its own might? Rome's golden age was on the horizon, but what would it take to get there? Thank you for joining me today. I'm your host Ethan, and if you're ready for part 2 of the Rome series, show some support by liking the video or maybe even subscribing. I mean, when in Rome, right? Thanks again, and remember, you've always got a seat at the historian's table.